Guest article by Berk Gümüs.
The Giza Intelligences, also known as Bafath, consisted of escaped criminals and power addicts who were in every respect in bondage to the Giza Intelligences in relation to their machinations and acted according to their plans. They would have to flee because they also caused mischief on the world where they lived and were pursued by security forces of their home world. The Giza Intelligences controlled for millennia all the entries into the terrestrial airspace and forced all those who could use them for themselves, through despotism and a violent change of judgment through brainwashing with drugs, electromagnetic, electrical, and mechanical torture, etc.
Short history of the Giza Intelligences SK_female sultry. The so-called Giza Intelligences belong to the ancient Lyrans, who inhabited certain areas on Earth in prehistoric times. About 15,000 years ago, after 18,000 years of peace, power-hungry scientists tried to seize all power. However, this did not succeed to them, because they were chased away by their peoples and fled with their spaceships into the Beta Centauri system, which is 4.3 light-years away from us. There, a people of malicious and bestial nature was bred out by the mentioned scientists with the distant goal to return to Earth one day to take revenge for their expulsion. In fact, this hateful people, this negative splinter group, returned to Earth about 13,000 years ago with the help of their large ships, under the leadership of the Jschwjsch Arus I. He was a scientist of extremely barbaric disposition, and was therefore called the barbarian. With a lightning attack, the country Hyperborea in the north of America was conquered first, and from there they acquired great power over the Earth inhabitants. In Hyperborea there was a very mild climate. It is the Florida of today, which was moved by a polar fall into this today's position. These aggressors led in any case a hard regiment with the Earth people subjugated by them and caused a lot of mischief, need, and misery. In their megalomania they even let themselves be celebrated as God in the sense of an almighty creator, demanded blood sacrifices and mostly deadly massacres as retaliation from the herd people. After some 1,000 years of their tyranny, it became then finally completely different, when the good-minded brothers Ptah and Salam ruled in a just and humane way and prepared an end to the bloodshedding and all the other evils. The third brother Arusam, who did not want this, was banished from the earth together with his followers 3,366 years ago. But it didn't take long for Arusam and his followers to secretly return to our Sol system. Arusam nestled with his followers mainly in the Earth's interior, 1,200 meters deep below the Cheops Pyramid, whose sub-Irish rooms were expanded to the headquarters with sophisticated security systems. Therefore, this negative splinter group is called the Giza Intelligences. For a more detailed description, see Contact Reports No. 5, 9, 38, 39, 55, 60, 70. They still pursued the goal of world domination on Earth, and for this they were willing to use any means. Forced to work underground, but with the most evil methods and machinations with intrigues, lies and deception, false teaching, misguidance, malicious influences, etc., impulsive telepathic. Since always, they spread religious false doctrines, recognized themselves Earth people as so-called extraterrestrial contact persons, who were then misled by dishonest influencing and abused as obedient followers for their world domination plans, according to Sim Yase, 723 Earth people, of which 27 stepped worldwide to the public, like for example Daniel Fry, Reinhold Schmidt, and Wilbert B. Smith. Very large was the list of people who appeared in public to deceptively and maliciously put people under their spell that they were in contact with beings of extraterrestrial origin. Many among them, who did this out of delusion or religious and professional reasons, while others were partially directed by the malevolent life forms in the pyramid. Their plan was, like in former times, to step again officially into appearance in order to bring the Earth humanity again under their rule with murder, punishment, and barbarism, and to be able to step again as angels and gods into appearance. They would have also, if necessary, by acts of violence and a world-encompassing large-scale war instigated to reach their goal. They operated with the earthly religions, and very much succeeded that unexplained humans with them stepped into connection and religiously were influenced. The way they operated was secretly working with false religions, and also their only way to achieve their goals, and to appear as gods and angels. They had no other possibility, because they knew very well that if they would take the rule over the earth and its inhabitants by force, the earth people would recognize the truth, and would rebel and defend themselves with all possible means. Their technology was very outdated, and they had to fear the Irish explosive weapons in every respect. So they were even less able to get involved in a war with the Earth people than they had been in the past. Their only possibility was that they could drive the Earth people into the last madness of their religions, to appear as gods and angels, and to seize the world domination as they did it before. The New Testament is, of course, just as much an evil corruption as all the other religious books that exist in this world. These were falsified not only maliciously by the people of the earth itself, but also often by the help of the extraterrestrial life forms, which directed many such gifts from the Pyramid of Giza. They supervised and influenced the secret Thule Society, via the then responsible persons of the Thule Society, as well as through their clairvoyant Hannessen Wand. The Giza Intelligences succeeded in taking possession of Adolf Hitler's being and to abuse him for their dark and malicious purposes, without him putting up a fight against it, because a delusional lust for power flared up in him himself. Beside this undertaking, still innumerable forces were manipulated in form of the Giza Intelligences' fallen Earth people consciously, and were put into his closest area, whose influence he was also not able to resist. Whereupon then, the Second World War was released. Just like all other religions, also the Christian religion is only an evil and mad enslaving work of earth people who found their religion justification in the wealth promised to them, and the power over fellow men, which had been promised to them by a degenerated extraterrestrial intelligence group, if they would spread the mad religion teachings. Reinhold O. Schmidt, Contact Reports Volume 1, Plejadisch-Plejarenische Kontaktberichte, Gespräche, Block 1, page numbers 308 to 312. Date, time of contact, the 3rd of February 1953.
I hereby speak of the extraterrestrial race, which here, since ancient times, wants to attain supremacy over the earth humanity, and, accordingly, to always again unfold the glow and flame of the various religions, and always new sects, because only through that may they obtain their goal. For thousands of years they deceived the earth human with religious miracles, and visions of every kind, in order to maintain, and to yet further increase, the religious delusion. Out of these grounds they have also created a mighty station under the Pyramid of Giza, in order to guide from there the religious delusional events of the earth. Self-evidently, they had to bring their great spaceship into security, so they constructed the underground hangar where their ship has already been stored for thousands of years. They direct and lead everything from under there that serves the purposes of religion and serves the religious and sectarian enslavement of the earth human. And in order to top it all off, they made the utensils some decades ago which you have seen there. 191. They are as false and inane as the attitude of this spacefaring group itself, because the true utensils of Emmanuel and also the cross are already long rotted away and decayed to dust. The imitation of the utensils succeeds as deceptively genuine, and this falsification would not be recognized even by an expert of your science with all the devices and apparatus available to him, because, in those kinds of things, this evil-minded group work with the most extreme precision and greatest ability. The life forms seen by you are the guards of the secret station, and they kill every life form which is ever lost in there. Their technical possibilities for the positioning of distorting radiations are, at any rate, very small. Subsequently, we can go in there, unconcerned, in invisible form. The meaning of the falsified Christ utensils lies in the intention that an earth human, in a very short time, will be influenced in a hallucinatory way by these malicious life forms, to such a degree that all that was seen by you can be transmitted to him as an entire experience. This Earth human already stands under the influence of these malicious beings. Often he is transferred into a trance state by them, and then the images are transmitted to him. He thereby perceives and feels everything exactly as if he hears, sees, feels, and experiences it in reality, although he only lies and sleeps somewhere, and everything is impressed into him as a dream. In the state of being awake, he will be just as much tricked as his friends and acquaintances by images of spaceships which indeed can be projected so true to reality that anyone can catch them on film. These appearances are, however, without exception, only nebulous and holographic pictures which are not able to exhibit actual contours. The entire meaning lies therefore only in a malicious deception with the purposes that the concerned Earth human, who will be called Reinhold Schmidt, talks about himself, and spreads the images and experiences and so forth, implanted in him by means of holographs and dream state hallucinations, in order to maintain the religion of Christianity. Thereby, such an Earth human will become an unconscious deceiver of himself and of all those who believe his explanations. Indeed, he does not know that he has never been in this pyramid with the spaceship and the counterfeit utensils, or that it has all only been implanted in him as reality through trickery, and that he has never flown in a spaceship any more than has another Earth human.
Reinhold O. Schmidt.
The deception maneuver has taken place, and the Giza Intelligences have even succeeded very well. The deception took place with an American named Reinhold Schmidt, a grain buyer from California. But he was also misused for other things, so he was fooled into traveling to the Arctic with a spaceship and so on.
Excerpt from UFOs: The Contacts by Michael Hesseman. On February 9, 1960, the Centurions took Schmidt in a spaceship to Egypt to the Cheops Pyramid. They explained to him that the construction of the 54-ton stones had been possible only thanks to the application of universal laws and natural forces that had canceled gravity. They led him to an underground room in the pyramid, a triangular chamber, where there was a small spaceship and evidence of the earthly work of Christ. After 1998, when a new age would begin, these secret chambers in the pyramid would be revealed, mankind would for the first time receive evidence of Christ's life and know his true origins. The spaceship, which Schmidt entered in 1957 in a dream state through hallucinations, (424th Contact Saturday, the 17th of June 2006, 1703 HRS).
Some others, such as Dan Fry and Schmidt, etc., were by the Giza Intelligences through means of teleprojection put into pseudo-realities with visionary experiences, which they deemed to be reality. Excerpt from UFOs: The Contact by Michael Hesseman. Dr. Daniel Fry was a highly accomplished scientist and electrical engineer. As vice president of Crescent Engineering Company in California and head of the research department, he developed several devices for the guidance system of the Atlas launch vehicle. Previously, Dr. Fry worked for Aerojet General Corporation, which assigned him to install instrumentation for missile guidance and control systems at the White Sands, New Mexico missile test site. During his time at White Sands, Dr. Fry had his first encounter with extraterrestrials. It was on the 4th of July. Actually, Fry had wanted to drive on this holiday, the American Independence Day, with his colleagues into the nearby Las Cruces in order to see there the fireworks announced for this evening and to celebrate naturally. But since he missed the last bus to Las Cruces, he had a little time to go out into the desert and admire the clear night sky. After some time of awe-inspiring sky watching, Fry noticed that one star after another seemed to be going out, until he noticed that a slowly descending dark craft was covering them more and more. Finally, the oval object about 9 meters in diameter landed only 20 meters from him. While Fry was still marveling at this evidence of an obvious high-altitude technology, a voice rang out. After a lengthy discussion of this ship's ancestral mechanism, the voice invited him to take a short trip in this ship, which turned out to be an unmanned carrier controlled by a mothership at a higher altitude. It was unmanned. The voice came by radio from the mothership. In 30 minutes, with a speed of 13,000 kilometers per hour, Fry flew in the UFO to New York and back. Impressed by this technical achievement, he asked his interlocutor, the alien A-Lan, about the propulsion mode of the spacecraft.
563rd Contact Saturday, the 1st of June 2013, 11:28 HRS.
As for the name Alan, which was used by Wilbert B. Smith, it was also a fantastic invention, as were all his utterances. With regard to the name Alan, it did not mean that he was a liar, but that the meaning of the name meant the liar. This is described in pp. Volume 6, page 264. Sentences. Ta 238. 248. The following. With regard to the name Alan, or what this word is supposed to be, we found out that it is just a falsely invented word formation which has no value or meaning. This word form is also not to be found in any of our languages or in any language we know, of which we know and have stored more than 3.7 million in our entire field of knowledge and expertise. You told me about this word formation Alan during my last visit, so that I could make sure in the meantime that it does not exist in any language known to us. According to this, a group of specialists tried to get to the bottom of things in Japan, and it turned out that the word formation Alan is a pure, unwise, and lying invention of deceitful and maliciously lying Earth humans whose evolutionary level is in the lower reaches of the earthly lowest level. As a name, this word formation Alan, which is intended to deceive and cheat, does not appear in the entire area of the universe known to us, but this does not mean that we do not know names of a similar form. Thus, for example, the names Alan, Aland, Alan, Alan, Aljan, Alan and Nala exist in various languages known to us, whereby this last name represents the reverse form of the mad word formation Alan. But the meanings for these names are all very negative forms, which is why they are only used there with the human beings who live in degeneration and exist with peoples whose education and observance in matters of truth and truthful evolution is still at a level of primitive form. So the names also mean primitive, just as Alan means the truth adverse. Aland means the truth twister, Alan has the meaning the truth verifier, and Alan stands for the unworthiness, the truth hater. The name Aljan has the meaning the destroyer, while Alan means the deceiver. Nala, the name which in the reverse form would result in Alan, has the meaning the liar.
Holographic spaceships of the Giza Intelligences filmed by Dr. Fry in May 1964 near Merlin, Oregon. Ashtashran.
Jschwjsch Arus I, alias Ashtar Sharon, belonged, like also the Giza Intelligences, to the old split-off Lyrans splinter group, which had set off already more than 22 million years ago into our Dern universe. He was, according to his task fulfillment given to him, the leader of a several thousand-headed crowd of intelligences, which stood under direct command of the world domination-addicted Kamagal. Arusiak and Kamagal were cousins according to their blood community. Kamagal, too, now chose one of his cousins to be the ruler of a group of several thousand people who had, or would have had, a very special task to fulfill. This task was based essentially on it, to steer different groups of people of Arusian descent telenautically into certain courses, in particular in Germany, America, Argentina, and Brazil, in order to give unconscious help according to the plans of Kamagal. During the first units of time, Arusiak, that is, Ashtar Sharon and whatever his other names may be, obeyed these orders unconditionally, so that Kamagal was granted further great power. In the course of time, however, he gained a lot of knowledge and changed his behavior. Until now, he only acted according to Kamagol's orders, but now he imperceptibly changed his tactics and influenced his troops in the first place, which he needed. Little by little he gained their trust and they recognized him as their real leader. Thus it was an easy game for him to gradually adapt to the acquired knowledge of the truth and also to act accordingly with the knowledge of his flock. In their agreement, they broke away from the rule of Kamagol and formed a new splinter group. This happened in the Earth year 1933. Since then, Arus I has been following his mission imposed by Kamagol at his own discretion, and has been impulsively transmitting his messages to various Earth people, spreading in addition with the Erdlmschen, an impulse-controlled mad faith mania around his person. The Jschwjsch group made up on hypnotic visionary basis physical contacts with people as well as alleged messages of Christian religious form. This, along with various other insidious machinations, triggered false assumptions and views in many people, even among civil servants and military personnel, etc. Also, to the confusion around the world, actual sightings with different flying machines were organized, as also strange animal mutilations, etc. were committed, as this also happened by humans who were influenced impulse hypnotically by the Jschwjsch group to it. The hypnotic contactors, among whom was one Wilbert B. Smith, came from various countries in Europe, Africa, Israel, South America such as Brazil, Argentina, etc., as well as in Australia and Russia, etc. Hypnotic direct contact means that the hypnosis is not carried out independently by devices, but directly by humans, whereby, however, the hypnotic thought energy transmission over large distances likewise takes place over strong transmitting devices. Smith stood thus, like many other contact people, with the contact under hypnosis with post-hypnotic aspect, and he acted with what he did, not consciously, and not after own will, as that was a usual proceeding with the Jschwjsch group, in order to be able to hold the contact people absolutely under control. And this was the case with all the numerous contacts who were abused by the Jschwjsch group. Such contacts with Earth people were very common through the Jschwjsch group, where this group simply impulsively influenced Earth people to make them willing tools for their dark machinations on Earth. These influenced people were in large numbers, but none of these people ever had any idea of what the actual reality of the contacts was and how they took place. In fact, they never had a real physical contact, but always only hypnotic impulsive, whereby also real visions belong to the whole, whereby many of such contact persons, who were abusively manipulated by the Jschwjsch group, were convinced that they had had real contacts with extraterrestrials. So they were not aware that they had no real encounters in this sense with the extraterrestrials. Consequently, they had also not flown in their flying machines, because actually everything was only faked to them by hypnotic real visions. By this hypnotic real vision deception, the contactors were misled in such a way that they were actually believed by the imaginations put into them that they had real contacts with extraterrestrials and had flown with their flying machines. So they could not distinguish the reality from the hypnotic illusion anymore, and lived or still live in the implanted imagination that their contacts had really taken place. Another fact was that these contactors were hypnotically suggestively given false data about the origin of the Jschwjsch group. Consequently, practically all these contactors were given different places of origin in their memory. The reason for this was on the one hand that thereby a worldwide disinformation should come about concerning the existence and origin of different extraterrestrials, while on the other hand also a plan of the Jschwjsch group was connected with it, which consisted in becoming domineeringly resident on the Earth and finding a new home there. The plan was that this group should appear, so to speak, for the earthly population as a savior in the emergency, namely against different bad extraterrestrial invaders who should have threatened then, allegedly, the Earth. For this, a big spectacle with air fights and fights in the Earth orbit was planned, in order to let everything appear real. And this would have led then finally to the fact that the Ashtar-Sharon group would have taken over the rule over the Earth, so to speak, as extraterrestrial protection armada. All this was aimed at with the hypnotic contacts to Earth people, and the whole should have come about after official contacts with the earthly governments had been taken up. This could have succeeded, in fact, just caused by impulsive influencing of certain Earth people, to which would have belonged finally also the rulers of all countries, who would have acted then according to the impulse inputs in such a way that the plans could have been realized. Since these persons, of whom there were a larger number, failed altogether and did not fulfill for us still unknown reasons their orders set into them, the bad plan did not come off. Ashtashran tried to seize power over Askit's people in the DAL universe, and died in heavy fighting in 1983 with his entire group and his entire space fleet. However, 4 prisoners were taken from the Ashtar-Sharon group before their armada was completely destroyed, one of whom was Ashtar-Sharon's first proxy and armada commander.
36th contact Monday, the 20th of October, 1975, 1357 HRS.
A part of his real name is Arusiak, along with another sequence of names, and he is a cousin of the supreme Giza intelligence. On their behalf, he controlled the old German Thule society, in which he introduced 2 strong telepathic factors, but which also influenced many Thule society members and various outside groups on a telenotic basis, including those who received the pseudo-messages of Ashtar-Sharon. 563rd contact Saturday, the 1st of June 2013, 1128 HRS.
A certain Wilbert B. Smith was probably a contactee, but unfortunately one of the negative kind. His contact was only a one-time and absolutely meaningless contact, and furthermore only a hypnotic direct contact with the group of the Ashtar-Sharon, whereby the whole thing was, as already mentioned, effectively of an insignificant nature.
Ashtashran possible appearance. Wilbert B. Smith. (724th contact Friday, the 11th of October 2019, 2149 HRS.
And the trick of the 2 groups, the Ashtar-Sharon alias. Ashtar-Sharon and the Giza Intelligences was that they were only in our presence when they caused mischief, whereas they were resident in another space-time plane, and only came into our presence temporarily and unnoticed by the strangers. And as far as Ashtar-Sharon alias Ashtar-Sharon is concerned, as far as I know, he was never in our presence anyway, but worked on his confused believers on Earth from another space-time plane.
236th contact Thursday, the 26th of April 1990, 003 HRS.
So now, it has happened that a malicious group had the audacity to kill you through this and, in this way, to destroy the entire teaching of the creation, the spirit, and the truth, by converting an aircraft in such a way that it worked as an independent robotic unit and hunted after you. The simple process was that in the aircraft, all the negative vibrations of the Earth humans that are directed against you were collected and stored in a block of sapphire of immense size, which was specifically provided for the aforementioned aircraft. For over 2 years, the fallible ones could work in this way, before we finally became attentive to this. But this only happened because we were trying to fathom why Yoshi Kozakura became disloyal. At the same time, we encountered 3 individuals who are very strongly influencing people who live in tremendous fear of the fact that you could convict them of swindle, lies, and deception. The thoughts of these negative people, however, were directed toward you in such a death-threatening manner that we felt compelled to explore the appropriate memory planes, by what means we found out that there are tremendously destructive powers stored against you, and that of these, inconceivably large quantities were simply taken from somewhere. Getting to the bottom of this incident was obvious for us, and we soon found the perpetrators of this murderous doing. A residual group of the now dead Ashtar Sharon, who finally concluded his life in the DL universe, felt obliged to be active as avengers of their former lord and master. And since they thought that they could avenge their dead master most impressively if they would nip the teaching of the truth on earth in the bud, they placed malicious negative impulses in several of your friends, which made them become disloyal and enslaved to swindlers, deceivers, and liars, as in the case of Yoshi Kozakura and a few others. But in order to destroy the teaching of the truth, the spirit, and the creation, as well as its laws and commandments, and to nip it all in the bud, they then thought that it was only necessary to transport you from life to death. And in order to manage all this, everything was to be handled in such a way that a natural death would be faked. Death should have come to you through the fact that you would have just been hit and killed by lightning. The intention was that a ball of lightning would be directed toward you by a search and target beam, whereby the explosion of the energy bomb would have then torn you to pieces, which we could only just barely prevent at the last moment, unfortunately. So that the fallible ones could realize their plans at all until now, it was necessary for them that they got a hold of all negative energies of your enemies by storing these in the aforementioned block of sapphire. With these forces, it was then possible for them to collect and accumulate the natural electrical ether energies that are concentrated at a small point above your center in order, then to form the energy ball as an actual high point, to shoot this out of the block of sapphire and to let this follow behind the search and target beam at the same lightning-fast speed in order to rip you to pieces in its explosion. Then, for the people around you and also elsewhere, it would have looked as though you had been hit and killed by a strange ball of lightning from a bright blue sky, which would have then been represented by your enemies and by the traitors, as well as by all sectarians, as God's vengeance. As this was already devised and pre-programmed by the fallible ones, all of whom we have fortunately captured, and whom, by the advice of the High Council, we have relieved of any technology, and whom we have exiled to a planet for the rest of their lives, from where they can never return with certainty.
Billy in the same position in front of the stone, in which he was struck by lightning. The surface hole in the stone, caused by the lightning's impact, 219th Contact Tuesday, the 16th of June, 1987, 1:30 HRS.
The danger of the pursuit of the refugees, or rather their distant descendants, by the distant descendants of the former inhabitants of Sirius, is no longer existent, because over many thousands of years, the disposition of the Syrians has changed for the better, and so now, they live in peace, and without ambitions for power. Today, their aspirations are more focused on consciousness, related in spiritual progress than just on power, revenge, and retaliation, in consequence of which also everything that had happened at the earliest times with the genetically manipulated ones and their work and escape was ordered into oblivion by a council's decision. But still, they also developed their technology further in every form. Consequently, they also became capable of changing from their space-time plane into another. But unfortunately, this was to the advantage of a small group of diehards who had taken over the old hatred and thoughts of revenge, as well as the retaliatory desires of the old Syrians from generation to generation, and also further maintained them. But today, these are now just 63 of their human beings who continue in the traditional hatred and try to cause harm to the most distant descendant of the Sirius refugees, even in the way that they try to transport you from life and thereby make your mission and the teaching of the Spirit impossible. Unfortunately, they also arrived into the possession of the technology that enables them to change into the most diverse space-time planes, so even into this one, in which the SOL system exists, which they have, indeed, found after centuries of searching. They try to cause harm to you, as well as to all those around you, and to the teaching and the mission and elsewhere, namely by intimidating and threatening the Earth humans who have observed our beam ships, or the ones of other extraterrestrial visitors to Earth, or who have found any proofs of their existence. Through these hateful elements that cooperated with the Giza Intelligences, human beings of the Earth were also injured or kidnapped, etc. But this only occurred rarely.
Syrian history. 251st Contact Friday, the 3rd of February 1995, 001 HRS.
Having become incapable of fighting itself, it bred new and genetically manipulated human races that were capable of fighting and protecting them from aggressors that appeared again and again. These new human races were made by intervening gene manipulations to life forms which carried barbarian features up to degeneracy and mercilessness in itself, whose life was limited, however, to only about 100 years, also gene manipulated, and that out of the justified fear and precaution that the gene-manipulated ones could gather against their producers and rulers and destroy these. A fear that then came true, which is why new ways were sought to bring the genetically engineered races back under control, even if that had to be through radical extermination. And since the producer-dominators were more powerful than the gene-manipulated ones, they had only the escape left, whereby they managed to flee from the serious areas by the help of well-meaning ones, while the well-meaning ones became avenged to take advantage of the genetically manipulated as well. Thus, two great races of genetically manipulated people fled the serious lands and settled beyond the sun, meaning that they settled on very remote solar systems. Planets beyond the galactic central sun, the Milky Way central sun, settled and settled down, in order to be discovered there one day by space travelers of the old Lyran lineage, after which they emigrated into the Lyra areas, and finally came in only recent Earth history on these planets, where they settled in China and Japan, etc., and formed the Chinese and Japanese peoples, from which different new branches and/or so-called races resulted. The remaining peoples of genetically manipulated people found their way from the Sirius areas to the SOL system, where on Earth several thousand rebellious genetically manipulated people were punished in various places, while the masses of the numerous different races of peoples found a new home on the planets Mars and Millennia, respectively Phaeton, where they built cities, pyramids and stations, etc., and led a good life. Before Mars became uninhabitable by cosmic influences, consequently the genetically manipulated, the people had to leave the planet, and that already in ancient times, after which they then settled on the Earth, and just in the course of time became the Earth people, whose actual and real origin lay in the areas and on the planets of the Sirius.
The Sirius system. Syrian MIB. (649th Contact Saturday, the 26th of March 2016, 1538 HRS excerpt from the Teachings and Explanations by Bafath from the 11th of June 1947.
What I am about to explain must not yet be made public, because otherwise, according to our directives, an intervention in earthly research will take place. So you still have to be silent about it, because only in about 30 years it will be so far that earthly scientists will gain knowledge in this respect, which we are not allowed to influence directly. The genetically manipulated have all sorts of readiness, as well as a strong propensity for risk, whereby they are also strongly success-oriented. The genetic manipulation was carried out in early times by Syrians on various ancient peoples in order to misuse them for warlike purposes. The hereditary gene manipulation on the X chromosome of both men and women was reprehensible, forming them on the one hand into a willingness to use violence, to fight, and to take risks, and on the other hand into beings who, in many relationships, were extremely coldly calculating and intent on their advantages. So the carriers of the manipulated gene variant were better fighters, and are able to always decide everything to their advantage, in every situation in life, but first of all in their warlike actions, whereby they always had good chances of success in fights and in dangerous and critical situations. So they were more willing to accept risk than non-genetically manipulated ones. This gene manipulation was carried out especially on men, but also on women, who as a result of this gene manipulation also infested their offspring with the manipulated X chromosome, which the Syrians called the battle gene. However, this gene manipulation had no or much less effect on the women themselves, because in contrast to the man who only has one X chromosome, the woman carries two X chromosomes. The manipulative modification of the X chromosome also led to a more aggressive, violent and impulsive behavior, which is why this kind of gene manipulation was also carried out to make fighters out of the people who defended their homeworld against battle-tested aggressors for the Syrians who were incapable of fighting, and who had been given Syrian freedom. Earth human behavior is very complex, and is influenced by genes as well as by personal and fellow human behavior, environment and circumstances. The manipulated X chromosome can unfold its full effect at any time with every human being on Earth, whether female or male, which leads to many violent degenerations, as earthly history of mankind proves sufficiently.
It has to be said about these conversations that in the meantime, since my father's instruction and explanation in 1947, earthly scientists have discovered gene manipulation, but have no idea that it is an artificially created gene manipulation of the X chromosome of male and female humans by the Syrians, so they regard the whole thing as a whim of nature. The fact is that interestingly they call it warrior gene, with the name MAO-L gene or monoamine oxidase A gene, respectively, while it was called combat gene by the Syrians, so the two names are not far apart.
And how large is the percentage of earthly population in relation to the gene manipulation that still exists today and in the future? And is it possible that those people who are still gene manipulated, and who do not have such manipulation of the X chromosome, are suggestively influenced by the manipulated, and also become violent, etc. by the still gene manipulated?
We do not have precise data on this, but only estimates which show that the entire Earth's population is roughly equal. And with regard to suggestive influence, our findings show that even non-genetically manipulated people can be suggestively influenced by genetically manipulated people for the use of force, etc., as these are characteristic of the effectively genetically manipulated. However, it must be said that the influence is much smaller than from gene manipulated to gene manipulated.
An equilibrium, then it can be assumed that everything is beautifully interwoven. And that non-genetically manipulated people can be suggestively influenced, as of course also genetically manipulated people, depends, in my opinion, with regard to the strength of the influenceability of the individual people, on how the people in question are influenced with regard to their character traits, their sense of justice, their steadfast own positive opinion, their courage to resist degeneration, dishonor, inhumanity, injustice, lack of dignity, as well as the courage to decide for themselves, self-determination and attitude to life, behavior, perception of responsibility, perception of reality and truth, righteousness, etc. are of a kind. And I think the less of these factors people have in a positive way, and to a good extent, the less resistance they have to influence.
This is true, because every time a person is influenced by other people, the values you have mentioned are the most important factors that determine whether or not an influence can take place. A person who carries and uses the factors you have mentioned as good values and in good measure will never be influenced, persuaded and transformed by suggestive influence on evil, negative, and iniquitous things.
So only people who lack the corresponding values, as I have called them, tip over and allow themselves to be influenced in an unjust way, regardless of whether they are gene manipulated or non-gene manipulated.
There's no doubt about it.
Your father Bafath explained to me in the 1940s that the gene manipulation of the X chromosome carried out by Syrians could be reversed by the gene-manipulated persons themselves over the course of time, and the new births of the always new personalities, which also happens continuously with Earth humans.
Of course this is correct, because the gene manipulation can be changed and dissolved by the world of thoughts and feelings and by the factors you mentioned, and can therefore be reversed, which has also happened continuously since the immigration of the refugees from the Syrian area, and consequently many people have freed themselves from the gene manipulation that took place on the X chromosome.
As I already know from your father Bafath, gene changes normally correspond to an evolutive process, whereby in the first and main way the thoughts and feelings of man, as well as his state of consciousness and psychic state and heredity, do the most important work for gene changes, while only in the second place all natural influences and changes of the planet etc. are decisive.
X chromosome and monoamine oxidase, a gene. Wikipedia information.
The L in Mao means low. The enzyme is produced only in small quantities. Accordingly, less dopamine is degraded, its concentration remains high. The body is under high voltage. For a recently published study, scientists at the California Institute of Technology Caltech had male students at the University of Santa Barbara multiply their starting capital of $25 in a financial simulation. The young men could choose between the safe option guaranteed no profit and no loss, or the risky option different risks of loss and chances of profit. The carriers of the MAO-L gene variant were more likely to accept financial risks, but only if it was really advantageous for them. Earlier studies showed that this gene variant is often associated with more impulsive and aggressive behavior, which is why it was named the warrior gene. The warrior gene is located on the X chromosome, so men inherit it from their mother. Since men have only one X chromosome known to be in the XY compound, the carger gene, if it is present, can develop its full effect. Women, on the other hand, have two X chromosomes, which means that a single warrior gene has no or less effect. Probably the filmmakers of Prometheus' Dark Signs were inspired by these reports. Because the film is about the end of the 21st century, a research group with the spaceship Prometheus traces evidence of extraterrestrial origins of human life, where they are received by the producer's rulers, not quite friendly.
(264th contact Thursday, the 14th of May 1998, 055 HRS).
In certain respects, yes. For example, in the matter that today we have clear evidence that it was actually those men in black who took so many important things out of your locked rooms and containers. Their many opportunities, which they have at their disposal and which they master, can be easily accomplished by such organizations. There are practically no limits to them, and that fact alone makes them very dangerous.
The guys don't shy away from murder either, not to mention their intrigues, which have always done them a lot of harm. Drove people mad and insane when they became annoying and they didn't just want to kill them, because their mental and conscious instability offered better opportunities to cover up their crimes. Not to speak of what they did and still do with forcing people, consciously or unconsciously, to do things that defy all rules of honorability and proper action. And what they have done and continue to do with regard to the leadership of certain governments and the military, etc., is really not a cowhide.
265th contact Thursday, the 11th of June 1998, 1:30 HRS.
Our observations have shown that the foreign beings known to you as the Men in Black are again becoming active against you, in connection with the fact that you have publicly denounced their machinations with regard to the photo forgeries. I am not only talking about the photo forgeries in relation to Ascot and Nera, but also about all the other photo material that has been falsified and imputed to you.
But it is, because certain enemies do not shy away from slander, nor from assassinations. I think that the attacks are less based on Earth-human initiatives than on the machinations of the men in black, whereby this rabble influences unstable Earthlings who then attack me.
This also corresponds to what we know. The influences and the related possibilities with regard to the post-hypnotic exercise of coercion on unstable Earth humans are extremely distinctive.
Then the assassin Earthlings are under post-hypnotic coercion. Seg_Mal Commander. 8th and the 10th of June, 1998. Once again, two remarkable dates, since on these days they have tried 2 more times to promote me from the living to the blessed, probably in response to the correction in Bulletin number 16 and on the Internet, regarding the rotten machinations of the men in black with regard to the Asket Nera photo forgeries, to which also Cal K. Korf and LB have taken a negative stance against me, because they believe they have to make themselves big and important in the matter of the alleged debunker of the Billy Meyer swindle, whereby they are also not afraid to use others for their slander. And now that this openly slanderous behavior of theirs has led to the correction in Bulletin number 16 and on the Internet, I would like to say that they bear some blame for the fact that new attacks have been made on me and my life. And this after long years of effective calm, during which no such attacks were made on me. Well, the facts of the attacks were the following. On the 8th of June 1998 at 16:40 HRS, I was about to walk from the remise in the Sim Yase Silver Star Center in the direction of the Pyle and Schmidrudewald storage area, when suddenly a shot rang out from the left, just as I had passed the right edge no driving sign and was at the height of the nearby red maple tree. With the bang of the gunshot, I felt the draft of a bullet against my forehead. At least that's how I interpreted the faint draft. And when the center residents and I searched the crime scene about 30 minutes later, after we had already inspected the immediate and wider area, we found the bullet hole of a .22 caliber bullet in the trunk of the red maple tree. The bullet hole was exactly at the level of my forehead when I stood next to the tree. Unfortunately, we were not able to find the person who shot at me, because during the time I ran into the house and fetched a gun so as not to be defenseless against another attack, the person who shot at me was able to disappear unseen. The shot was heard both by Connie Wechter, who was standing just in sight about 30 meters away from me, and by her daughter Aruna, who was close to her. But the shot was also heard by Eva Bieri in her office, as well as by Davida Turla, a passive member, at the Schmidrudewald campsite about 50 meters away. Connie Wechter was therefore in direct line of sight of me and could observe me closely. But she did not see the person shooting either, which is not surprising, because as the 3 of us could see later, he was hiding in the bushes on the mountainside, where I could not see him, although he was only about 8 meters away from me. And just at this distance it seems like a miracle that the shot missed me, even if only by a millimeter or 2 on the forehead. With the failed shot, I thought, the matter was once again settled, as it had always been with all previous shots. But far from it, because 28.5 hours later, in the early hours of the morning of the 10th of June, there was another attack at 3:05 HRS, this time with a cheap throwing knife, which the attacker obviously did not know how to use, fortunately for me. Silvano Lehman was on guard duty that night, and was just on his way below the garage car park when I walked across the square and approached him, hearing noises twice on the wooded uphill side. Although the moon was in the sky and dimly illuminated the car park and Silvano and I, we were unable to see anything in the direction of the sound, because everything there was in darkness due to the woodland. Standing a little higher in front of Silvano, face to face through the car park embankment, we listened into the darkness for 1, 2, or 3 minutes. Then suddenly I felt a violent thump in the kidney area of the left side of my body, which was followed by a metallic clang as something fell to the ground to my left. Of course, as I had my torch in my hand, I immediately shone it on the ground to see what had hit me and fallen to the ground. Silvano and I immediately saw that it was a throwing knife, which had apparently been hurled at me in an uninformed manner, and luckily hit me in the kidney area with the pommel first, because it was probably spinning on its own axis during the flight, which caused a considerable pain that was slow to subside and lasted for several days. If the knife had missed me and had thus flown past me, it would certainly have spun again in flight and hit me directly in Silvano's face, who was standing somewhat engrossed on the lower path only about a meter in front of me. When we immediately flashed our lamps and illuminated the darkness on the mountainside and very quickly searched the footpath there, we could already find nothing, however, except for the obviously lost throwing knife sheath, because obviously the knife-throwing person was quicker with his disappearance than we were, because after all we first had to walk 10 meters before we reached the footpath. 10 meters, which was also the distance over which the throwing knife was hurled at me. What I can say about it is only this. I find it pathetic and sad that people want to get rid of the truth in this way. No matter whether the men in black were behind the attacks and used an unstable Earth human being for their dirty purposes as usual, or whether it was simply a confused Billy Meyer enemy, which I doubt though, because I rather think of men in black machinations. Because most of the attacks that have been carried out so far are due to them influencing unstable Earth humans and forcing them to dance to their will. Because they do not do the dirty work themselves, and certainly not with their own sophisticated weapons, whose mode of action would reveal secrets that must remain as such. Either way, they are, in my opinion, poor lunatics who will one day have to wear their own skin to the market, fetching an immensely poor price for it. Billy.
AI colorized photo. The bullet hole in the red maple tree, from the assassination attempt on Billy on the 8th of June 1998, at 16.40 HRS. Photo Freddy Kropf. AI colorized photo. A throwing knife with sheath found after the assassination attempt on Billy on the 10th of June 1998. Photo Freddy Kropf. Cyberfolk?
That is of correctness. Your asset of recognizing connections from short statements does not deceive you, and you recognize everything correctly in this case. During the course of yesterday afternoon, on a small planet system, which we call the Charon system, and which is located on the far side of the Andromeda system, one of our search units identified impulses that were identical to those which emanate from the energy bell that is roofed over you. These
And how far away is it from the Earth?
2.8 million light-years, thus far on the other side of the Andromeda system. But now, hear what we found. Our unit followed these impulses to a small and very inhospitable planet, where metal domes were soon spotted, which were located in a large desert, and from which the impulses were apparently being emitted. This quickly proved to be true, as defensive reactions of the dome stations appeared, which very quickly brought our unit under control and to a halt, after which the stations were then seized and the inhabitants were arrested. But it turned out that it was another faction of the Giza Intelligences, who had to leave the Earth at a very early stage and who had formed a separate people, whom they call Saban. As it turned out, these folk have always been in constant touch with the real Giza Intelligences remaining on the Earth, so it was easy for them and their allies to get in touch after the deportation through a consciousness block, after which the Sabans then helpfully stepped in and gave the Giza Intelligences every aid, while they themselves also actively cooperated and even pursued the same objectives since ancient times. In addition, they had not remained idle over many centuries, but they developed malignant technologies that enabled them for several months to send out, across millions of light-years, negative swinging waves that were polarized toward the smallest targets, which exhibit the characteristic that they take the available negative swinging waves of the same kind from the target and concentrate them into an immense ball of power, without the originators of the swinging waves noticing a reduction in their strength, and without the originators of the swinging waves losing anything of their own swinging waves.
I understand. Then the negative swinging waves of the believers, sectarians, and religious fanatics, etc., are probably those which are taken and concentrated into an enormous and destructive ball of power, right?
That is of correctness. But that is not enough, because as a result of the acquired technology, the Sabans have succeeded in having their swinging waves affect targets, located millions of light-years away, in such a concentrated manner and exactly to the millimeter, such that they could locate and hit a fly on the Earth from their impulse location in the Charon system. Taking advantage of these, they attacked those group members, who are still, in certain parts, dependent on faith and who indulge in unrealities and in uncontrolled emotions, etc., whereby these ones increasingly thought and acted illogically and improperly. But now, that should not and cannot be an excuse for the misconduct of the fallible ones, because already long ago they should have overcome the conditions of such degeneration and instability, so that they could not be attacked by and could not be influenced by such powers anymore. However, these fallible ones are not the only ones who were directly impacted by these Giza impulses, because the same thing also happened with many other human beings of the earth, who have been in contact with you within a nearer or further framework since the days when Jschwjsch first made contact with you. It is just that previously we knew nothing about all this, so we could do nothing about it. We also lacked the knowledge that several centuries ago, a Giza group had isolated itself and had departed from the earth in order to form their own new nation, which continued working nevertheless within the old framework and with the same goals, far from the earth, and in constant connection with the remaining Giza intelligences. Only now has all of this become clear and perceptible to us after we have apprehended the criminal elements of whose existence we had no knowledge. And now, in order to remove the danger of these elements, we are forced to eliminate all the achievements of their efforts, whereby great difficulties arise, nevertheless. The Sabins have so secured their installations that if we attempted to destroy them, a catastrophe, reaching far into the cosmos, would be triggered. This through a time effect, according to which after a certain time, an immensely far-reaching and deadly reaction of destruction would be triggered on their planet if we simply destroyed the installations. So in the course of yesterday afternoon, we had to use the special commands by which the existing danger could be averted. The time effect of the release of the disaster and destruction had to be reversed, so that the time becomes reduced to the starting point, whereby a diffusing then occurs. It has.
This would be, so to speak, a time bomb of which you speak, if I understand you correctly. In addition, your comments must mean that this time bomb cannot simply be diffused, but that its ignition can only be stopped if the already started time period is stopped and is then reversed back to zero time, whereby the danger can only be averted then, if the already started running time has arrived back at its starting point. This is clear to me so far, but I do not understand why you cannot destroy the installations if you can already stop the flow of the time period.
The whole thing is constructed so ingeniously that the catastrophe would be released even if the flow of the time period was just interrupted and the installations were destroyed. The only way to prevent the catastrophe is to reverse the time of expiry and make it effective in retrograde. 34. Only then would the danger be averted. After which we could then perform the elimination. But we must count on the fact that we need to dissolve the entire planet into energy, because it has been so thoroughly developed and transformed that it is truly nothing more than an overkill bomb that, in its gigantic magnitude, would completely destroy everything within millions of kilometers if it would come to explosive effect.
Andromeda system and an artist's conception of dome stations. '55th Contact Monday, the 14th of June, 1976, 10:37 HRS.
Ganymede is a very metal-like small planet and not habitable. There are no people living there either, but there are a few alien human life forms that are stationed there for a short time. But it is not a spaceship.
But the life forms that are stationed there maintain the contacts with the Earth humans?
Sure, because they are the Giza Intelligences.
Ganymede. Pegasus refugees.
But we were also unaccustomed to catching your uncontrolled thoughts, because they testified to an uncontrolledness that had never before appeared in you. Thus, all this had to have its reason, and is why we followed your thought processes and came across your observation on the 12th of August, when you stood pondering at the tree in question and observed a large insect that should not have been there, because these kinds of insects no longer exist in your area and are also completely abnormal at the size of 14 centimeters. Something about it therefore did not appear right. Quetzal researched the occurrence in the past and found the oversized insect, a flying, praying mantis, recorded in pictures by an area analyzer. From the pictures, it was only a routine task for him to find out that it was an artificial insect that had a complicated device in its body for harboring and exposing mutated bacilli. When this artificial insect flew twice around you and around the tree, remotely controlled, it sprayed through an outlet a small part of the mutant bacilli that immediately attacked you and infected you with a disease unknown to you that could have very serious consequences if Quetzal had not intervened. He and a few others have been working on a drug that he has been spraying throughout the Earth's atmosphere since yesterday, because the bacilli have spread very widely and are threatening to spread all over the planet. But all those people who had been in the center in the last few days were particularly at risk, because most of them were directly infested by the bacilli. The artificial insect, as we discovered less than 20 minutes ago, has put a breeding ground in the tree in which the mutated bacilli breed and multiply. Now I am here to destroy this malignant breeding ground. Further, I am here to clarify some other things that are still unclear to us. For example, the incident of the 16th of August, when you saw a figure with unusually large visual organs. It is.
Yes, that thing had candlesticks, eyes as big as beer plates. They also fluoresced. The figure was about as big as Herbert, which Renato also noticed.
Quetzal and I will finally clarify things about the events that have occurred in the next few days. We do not have any exact dates yet, so we do not know what the purpose of the whole thing is and where it all comes from. What is certain so far is that the Giza Intelligences have joined forces with a group of fleeing and malignant intelligences from space who are involved in the concerns of the Giza Intelligences and are helpful to them. Their outer forms correspond to your observation that they have oversized eyes and some other special things about them. This also means that you were not suffering hallucinations when you saw that figure on the night of the 16th of August.
The 24th of August, 1977, 12:03 HRS. Bullet hole of the Bacillus gun destroyed by Billy with Jschwjsch's beamship laser gun on the apple tree, which was therefore called the Jschwjsch tree. AI colorized photo, the 24th of August, 1977, 12:02 HRS. Close-up of the bullet hole site of the bacillus nest on the Jschwjsch tree destroyed by Billy, with Jschwjsch's beamship laser gun. (452nd contact Saturday, the 7th of July, 2007, 15:11 HRS).
Thanks. Firstly, I would like to question you regarding the deportees, the Giza twerps, and the Pegasus refugees. In the 81st contact on the 4th of September 1977, Quetzal said the following.
It is a work of the Giza Intelligences in cooperation with the refugees from the Pegasus area. Namely, these were located by the group in Brazil about 6 weeks ago and drew attention to these, whereupon a communication took place between them. The merger with the Giza Intelligences was then only a question of time. Very well orientated about the events in your center and in detail about the group members, they also knew of the growing existence of the actual value of the Sohar Center. This, however, the actual value means ultimate danger for them, because if it is perfected, and if it is in operation, then they have finally lost. Exactly this they want to prevent, which is why every unobtrusive way to destruction will suit them. So they made the knowledge of the Pegasus refugees usable for themselves and so also their equipment. An oscillation vibrator, working on a microwave basis, suited them very much, to cause damage to the real value of the arising Sohar center and possibly destroy it.
Therefore now the question. At that time it happened that the Pegasus refugees attempted to cause severe damage to us in the center. How does it now make sense, however, their appearance on the Earth thus, since you have recently said anyway, that through your clarifications, you have determined that during the last 300 years, there have been no other Earth foreigners other than those which you mentioned to me. However, what was it then with the Syrians and Ashtar Sharon and gangs?
We were only later able to clarify the facts about the Pegasus refugees when the whole story about the Giza Intelligences clarified. The refugees belonged to a splinter group of the Giza Intelligences, who lived in the space-time displaced region of the Pegasus constellation, and who had entered an alliance with the faction living on the Earth. Therefore, they were counted as one of the Giza Intelligences, and consequently were not described as special foreigners.
Possible appearance of Pegasus refugees. Brazilian group and the poison gas breathers. 66th contact Wednesday, the 10th of November 1976, 1418 HRS.
They robbed German and Canadian plans for the construction of flying discs with which they are able to fly almost effortlessly into the earthly space today. They also came into the possession of a foreign spacecraft of a human race from a distant galaxy. The interstellar drive, however, was destroyed beyond recognition, so they could only use the anti-gravity drive for planetary flight. With this ship, which offered them many possibilities, they also tracked you. It was the same ship that you recently tracked down in Winkelried near Wetzikon, but which had landed there weeks before when you found the mysterious tracks. The crew of the ship that had used the aircraft to fly to the Earth is dead. They all died after their breathing apparatus became empty and could not be refilled. They were poison gas respirators, a gas that is still unknown on the Earth. Over time, their ship, in the hands of the Nazis, could have had dire consequences for the Earth humans, which is why we were forced to destroy it completely when they left it unattended for a few moments. These, dear friend, are the facts that have emerged from our research. Beware of these Nazists, or neo-Nazis as you call them, because they too fear for their existence through you. Always think about being wary and about the fact that the enemy is also in Germany, especially in those circles that openly work against you.
452nd contact Saturday, the 7th of July 2007, 1511 HRS.
Then that now is finally clear. The connections with the Giza honchos and other extraterrestrials are therefore much trickier and more extensive, as you told me. But even so, I also have never asked about it. Consequently, you also have told me nothing about the details. Then, however, I have a problem again, and in fact with the extraterrestrial aircraft that the Brazilian group had, from which I was set about in the year 1976 in Winkelried near Wetzikon. You told me at that time, which unfortunately was not recorded in any contact report, that it concerned a beamship, which indeed was piloted by people from a distant galaxy, and in fact with poison gas breathers or such, that they, however, were members of your Federation, if I am not mistaken. With the 65th contact on the 23rd of October 1976, you said the following.
Further also, I was able to clarify the events in the Winkelried near Wetzikon near your domicile, so in addition also the existence of that track of a beamship, which was not from one of our beamships. With the track discovered by you, it concerns a ship of the Brazilian private interest group who had sent out a command for the most exact probe of your circumstances. In accordance with my investigations, it was about 5 people who checked everything very accurately. The ship doesn't even represent a product of the power group itself, but loot. It was stolen from a crew from a distant galaxy who landed in Brazil years ago, who had to make a forced landing because of some damage. The interstellar drive of the ship was completely destroyed and cannot be repaired again, at least not by the technicians of this power group. Only the planetary anti-gravity drive is fully functional, which is suffice for planetary flights. However, you saw the same ship weeks later in the Winkelried, where you, on your very irrational search for this, for you, mysterious object, also discovered this, which put you very much in danger. 2 men were in the terrain out there and observed your arrival, which was an easy game for them because at the time they observed you constantly. In the desire to kill you, they prepared everything and steered you to the place of the planned event. It was your luck that you drove in your vehicle with caution and without lights on that dark night, because it was only through this that you were not exactly recognizable in the darkness, that the shot from the gun missed you. Unfortunately, you are mistaken, dear friend, because the strangers were not members of our Federation, but they belonged to another group of the Giza Intelligences and were stationed also with these, whereby they had to make an emergency landing in Brazil at that time and were captured by the Brazilian group. Actually, they were poison gas breathers who all died when their respiration equipment failed. They could not leave the Earth anymore because their interstellar drive was completely destroyed, which was a work of the Giza Intelligences, as we found by experience through the members of the Syrian group. The reason for the destruction of the drive was so that they could not flee, because the Giza Intelligences had a change in fundamental attitude.
And the Giza twerps didn't undertake anything, as the ship had to make an emergency landing in Brazil, and the respiration equipment failed, so also nothing, since the old Nazis of the Brazilian group captured the ship.
Their nature and behavior was that they simply gave up lost aircraft, as also they were not concerned about missing people, etc. either. Furthermore, they were on close terms with the Brazilian group, which, however, that already for a long time does not exist anymore, because every one of the faction has died by now because of aging and illness. Possible appearance by the poison gas breathers?
All these groups mentioned above have died in the meantime or were deported. The question remains open whether the descendants of this Brazilian group, who still live in South America secretly and undiscovered, and meanwhile with their very futuristic and progressive aircrafts that they fly around, have any connection to the 11ER group and the military-industrial complex remains open.
Jehovah and Mose. 39th Contact Wednesday, the 3rd of December 1975, 1:37 HRS.
Well then, since you know about that, I mean the old dear God, Jschwjsch the Barbarian, as I have christened him, or the Lord Jehovah, as he was commonly called.
Thus the one of the old time or Moses' time.
Exactly. I mean the superhero, that ambivalent subject who, on the one hand, proclaimed himself as the creation, and boastfully spoke of universal love, mercy, and justice, but who, on the other hand, heedlessly demanded innocent human blood, and allowed millions of Earth humans to be brutally slaughtered at his command.
That is a very accurate statement. His image is known to me very well. You call him the biblical God, but with us he is called the unjust and cruel one. He came to his end approximately 2,150 years ago. He was a very malicious and power-hungry life form who led his regime together with another and good Jschwjsch and drove countless Earth humans to death and destruction.
And to whom today's Christianity still pays hellish tribute.
Sure, unfortunately that is so, for his malignant influence was enormous.
230th Contact Wednesday, October 11th, 1989, 4:01 HRS.
Never mind. Let's leave that, because I still have some things to ask. At the official 215th Contact on February 28, 1987, we talked about Sodom and Gomorrah. When I asked you what actually happened, you explained this, which I'll read out. There are several factors to this. On the one hand, a meteorite crashed to Earth and exploded high above the area of the two cities, which today would actually be called larger villages. This led to devastating destruction of the two cities, and also triggered a severe earthquake, which also, as with Petra, ruptured the earth and caused small and large chunks of sulfur to be hurled up and over the land by underground volcanic activity, which of course also caused much havoc, and as a result of which, as with the exploding meteorite, many people were killed. The remaining part of the total destruction was caused by the megalomaniac and mad god of the Hebrews, an extraterrestrial who had his headquarters deep under the pyramid of Giza. His punishment for the disobedience of the population of Sodom and Gomorrah to his orders was to detonate 2 small atomic bombs over the two cities, finally leveling everything to the ground and killing all humans and animals. So much then from your explanation. Excerpt from Talmud Emmanuel p. 125, chapter 15. Moses was in contact with an extraterrestrial and preached monotheism to the Hebrew community, which he taught on behalf of the then Jschwjsch Jehovah. Jehovah, Moses, and Sodom and Gomorrah.
Fifty-fifth contact Monday, the 14th of June, 1976, 10:37 HRS.
I can answer the second question by no, nor do any of Quetzal's forefathers belong to Quetzalcoatl. Quetzalcoatl had been, in Earth terms, a very high officer or a high supervisor of an extraterrestrial group, which was active in the region you today call Egypt. But he was very knowledgeable and wise, and thus was often assigned special missions, of which one brought him to South America, where he became venerated as a god by the Aztecs. Since he owned a small ship, this impression of the Aztec people was strengthened, but this was not his intention. When he first met together with another commissioner, a certain Huitzilopochtli, he changed his conduct. Huitzilopochtli was one of the leading Giza Intelligences, and he exercised a bloody sacrifice-based rulership over the Aztecs. He was insatiable in this respect and demanded human blood as sacrifice, while Quetzalcoatl was against such. Thus an evil enmity rose between them, and each of them sought to gain leadership over the peoples. By wicked deceit and deceptive machinations, Huitzilopochtli succeeded in expelling Quetzalcoatl, in consequence of which he fled and returned to Egypt.
Huitzilopochtli.
It is important to note that the only surviving Aztec religion practiced in Mexico to this day is the Santa Muerte. The Santa Muerte has believers followers among the Mexican police forces, militaries, high-ranking politicians, and among the sicarios, etc. Santa Muerte gives the believers the authority to commit all kinds of outrages. Because the basis of this belief is, you are under the protection of the holy death Santa Muerte, and anything you do under its protection will not be experienced by God, so you can do whatever you want without fear of being punished by God for your actions. Coatlic became Santa Muerte in the 1980s and 90s. Coatlic mythology, mother goddess of the Aztecs. Coatlic was once a very beautiful woman who lived in Teotihuacan, the city of the gods, long before the world was created. Her destiny was to populate the earth and the stars. Her beauty attracted many gods, but eventually she married Mixcoatl, the god of hunting, war, and the solar star. She had already given birth to 400 children, the stars of the south, and was thus the mother of all the gods. Coatlic, the goddess of earth fertility and death, took care of her countless children and lived contentedly in the city of the gods. One day, however, Coatlic became suspicious. Mixcoat, her husband, became more and more distant from her, and she secretly spied on him. And she caught Mixcoatl in flagrante with another woman. Coatlic's reaction was outrageous. With one blow, the beauty turned into a raging fury. She pounces on the lovers and kills her husband in front of the horrified eyes of his lover. From now on, nothing was the same. Coatlic turned into a monster. Her head became a bone skull flanked by 2 snakes. Her hands and feet formed eagle claws. Her extremities consisted only of blood. Her breasts hung limp, and around her body formed a skirt of snakes. Around her neck she wore a ribbon with the hearts and skulls of her victims. She became a terrifying creature. One day she was on the Kotpek mountain of snakes when a ball of hummingbird feathers rolled in front of her feet. She picked up the ball and hid it under her skirt. Sometime later she tried to retrieve the ball of feathers but couldn't find it. A short time later Kotlik knew she was pregnant, but she had not been with another man since the murder of her husband. Her children, the Senson Huitznahuac, were horrified when they heard of the pregnancy. Revenge for their murdered father had been fermenting in them for a long time, and now they all turned against the mother, especially the daughter Koyolxauqui, leader of the Senson. She called on her godbrothers and sisters to move to Kotepec to kill the mother and her unborn child. While the Senson stormed Mount Kotpek, Kotlik gave birth to her son Huitzilopochtli. However, he was not born as a baby, but as a state warrior with full armor. He immediately fought his siblings, killed Koyolxauqui after she cut off Coatlik's head, decapitated her and threw her head into the sky, whereupon he became the moon and comforted his mother in the dark nights. His brothers, killed by him, became the stars in the sky. It is interesting that the only Aztec religion that has survived to this day, as mentioned before, has a direct connection to Huitzilopochtli and thus to the Giza Intelligences.
Kotlik and Santa Muerte. Things to know about the Giza Intelligences. 34th Contact Sunday, the 14th of September, 1975. 1343 HRS.
Sure, you even know them very well, and my speech is related to the world domination addicts mentioned earlier. And I am talking about those of extraterrestrial origins who want to bring this world under their control, the Giza Intelligences. They use not only mystically inclined and misguided earthlings, but also other groups, mostly those that for some unclear and rather confused reason show anarchistic tendencies, such as the Red Army in Japan, the German Baader-Meinhof Group, the Red Army Fraction, and the American Symbionese Liberation Army. The latter group, the American, is to be inspired by the aforementioned malignant intelligences to commit an extraordinary crime. If they succeed, it would lead to a worldwide catastrophe. But this should be prevented by a countermeasure.
A mass murder of the Giza Intelligences. 35th Contact Tuesday, the 16th of September, 1975. 9:14 HRS Thought Transmission Contact.
The world domination-addicted intelligences of Giza are preparing a very malicious crime to harm various other intelligences they dislike and question their credibility. In recent times, they have made great efforts to influence terrestrial humans in sectarian form in order to commit, in this form, an unusually malicious crime against human life, whereby the existence of extraterrestrials is to be made impossible and ridiculous, but whereby, on the other hand, their madness of religion for the purpose of their world domination addiction is to find new breeding ground for them. Here's the thing now. For some time now, a couple of Earthlings in particular have been under the evil influence of the Giza Intelligences in order to initiate criminal and degrading things in their evil sense. The purpose of these machinations is to mislead Earthlings in larger masses with the lying instruction that the Earth will no longer be habitable in about a decade. According to this assertion of lies, the Earth humans would therefore die en masse, and everything would fall prey to death. However, it is not given that all terrestrial humans must die, why a rescue by extraterrestrials is intended. Willing persons would therefore be picked up by extraterrestrial intelligences by a spaceship and brought to another, better and more beautiful world, where they would have a free and better life. This has already been announced through billboards and other advertising. Also, a meeting serving this evil cause was already held last Sunday, the 14th of September, 1975, declaration of the 16th of September, 1975, to get hold of the willing. That is what happened in America in a place called Waldport. The interested people were told at this meeting that from now on they could go to a camp where they would be prepared for the alleged flight into space in order to cope with the complaints of spaceflight, but also to gather the necessary knowledge of the new life on the pretended other and better world, and to adapt to the new life. The only condition for this resettlement undertaking was that all earthly goods be sold or otherwise disposed of, and that no children be taken along. Unfortunately, there was more willingness for this evil enterprise than could be calculated. In haste, many of the interested followed and chased after the lures of the advertisers to await in said camp for the things which were supposed to come. The further consequences of this well-considered criminal enterprise are absolutely clear to us, and there are various prospects for the misguided. 1. The whole enterprise is to be disguised in a religious form, in the form of a new sectarianism, whereby all the willing are to be deceived and misled in order not to grasp the real background. Weak and otherwise unfit persons shall be gradually separated and murdered. 3. Several of those found to be fit are to be slavishly forced, as work robots on Earth, to perform frontline duties for the benefit of the Giza Intelligences, who need many earthly things, but which they do not want to acquire through their own work. 4. Several of those found to be fit are to be abducted and enslaved away from Earth. 5. Several should found a new sectarian organization and thus work on Earth in a religious form for the plans of the Giza Intelligences. These 5 points were elaborated by the Giza Intelligences and will be applied. However, the Earthlings advocating this plan are not aware of these facts because they live in an implanted delusion. Now, however, the Giza Intelligences have ascertained that we are concerned about the matter, so they are looking for new ways in order to not let their undertaking fail. But there is the danger that the misguided will all be murdered, because for the world, domination addicts the life of an Earth human is of absolute insignificance.
Poster for the meeting on September 14, 1975 on Sunday in Waldport, Oregon.
On March 26th, the bodies of Applewhite and 38 of his followers were found in their mansion in the community of Rancho Santa Fe. They had apparently committed suicide in 3 stages. 15 members died on March 24th, 15 more on March 25th, and 9 on March 26th. The 39 dead lay neatly in bunk beds, covered with purple sheets and wearing uniform black clothing, new sneakers and bracelets with the inscription, Heaven's Gate Away Team.
Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles. '55th Contact Monday, the 14th of June, 1976, 10:37 HRS.
But now something very special. Did you already hear that, Sigma Roma?
What is this question? How did you get this knowledge and what are you doing with it?
You seem to be alarmed?
Are you surprised? What is the purpose of this question and how do you know about this code and what do you intend to do with it?
Just give it a rest. Why are you so upset?
Are you trying to mislead me?
I do not have that in mind, and you really do not need to get upset.
Is that so? Should I really not, when I learn that you are obviously going into dangerous and misleading realms?
I do not see why.
Is that so? You do not know that either? Then why do you break the code and speak it backwards?
But I'm not doing that, girl.
You should not tell me an untruth. It is really too dangerous.
Now knock it off. You are threshing empty straw. Are you really that worried about me?
More than that, my friend, because I know the Giza Intelligences too well not to worry about you when you come to me with their code.
You are not saying that these 2 words are a code of these Giza twerps?
What do you think I am worried about you for?
Oh, you blew Heinrich, I did not know that. I received this Sigma Roma from Mr. Rees. He explained to me that he had received this code through a telepathic contact from somewhere, and that I should tell you about it.
Is that really the case?
I am not lying to you.
I do not accept it, and I do not see anything like it, but the Giza Intelligences have many possibilities. Well, the words of the code are offset, and I do not want to mention them in their correct composition, because they do not.
Hold a certain seductive value. I already figured it out myself. Right?
You think very quickly, but I must ask you to be silent about it.
Naturally.
It is the code of the intelligences of Gizeh through which they make themselves mutually recognizable. This is important to them, for their various groups unlawfully call themselves descendants of various races and celestial systems to Earthlings. This is how they call themselves life forms from Mars and Venus, but they also use our pro forma homeworlds for fraudulent purposes.
Guest article by Berk Gümüs.